now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, my friend, Dr. Robert Johnson. In his short tenure as president at Becker College, Robert has already transformed the college, improving its local and national reputation, adding innovative new programs, improving finances, and building new buildings. He is already well known for his work ethic and energy. The school's motto, "Be the Change," and its commitment to social responsibility and training responsible global citizens reflect the values of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I won't go over his whole CV, but it's well outlined in the program. Dr. Johnson's talk today is Keeping the Dream Alive, a 21st Century Perspective. Welcome, Robert.
Good afternoon. Oh, come on now, good afternoon. It's a little bit more like it. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Corbett Bill and Dr. Flott, Terry Flott, Debbie Plummer, Monica, of course my lovely wife, Karen Mitchell, and everyone for being here today. It is truly an honor to come together to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. As I think about Dr. King and his legacy, I just want to spend a few minutes for us to reflect on the past and to think about the future. As I think about the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it should be very proud of the heritage and its history as it relates to social justice. Massachusetts is the birthplace of people such as Crispus Attucks and W.E.B. Du Bois. And it is fitting that we celebrate this day standing on the shoulders of those who have come before us. The state of Massachusetts has a rich legacy and history of African Americans who have gone on into the world and into the community to make a difference. May it be the 54th Massachusetts Infantry, which was one of the first African American regiments in the Civil War to be formed. May it be the legacy of Phyllis Wheatley, who was America's first African American poet. Massachusetts is and always will be a beacon of light and hope for the voice of social justice and for the cause of righteousness. We have all come here today to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I did not know Dr. King. However, my Uncle Bob, Robert E. Johnson, and I'm his namesake, who was the associate publisher and executive editor of Jet magazine, graduated with Dr. King in 1948 from Morehouse College. They were part of what was once known as the infamous class of '48. You had Dr. King and my Uncle Bob, Lerone Bennett Jr., Howard Thurman, and a host of others. So part of what I will share with you today is through the lens of growing up at the feet of my uncle, who was also my mentor, in terms of him sharing stories with me about the civil rights movement and the things that he did at Jet magazine. It was the legacy of my Uncle Bob who led me to ultimately attend Morehouse. So I would be remiss, given that Dr. King and my Uncle Bob, as am I, are all graduates of Morehouse, if I did not try and speak to you today in the Morehouse tradition. Today's theme is Keeping the Dream Alive, a 21st Century Perspective. Today and throughout the holiday celebration, across this nation and around the world, regardless of color or class, people will gather in schools and churches, in synagogues and sanctuaries and auditoriums and gymnasiums, on their jobs and in jails, in halls and in homes, to honor the life and the work of the late, great Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. There will be sermons and speeches, marches and monuments, programs and proclamations, testimonials and teach-ins. There will be observances and honorary degrees conferred. There will be services and singing, and every event will be designed to bring about a commitment to Dr. King and a rededication to his dream. Today, we are dedicated to honoring the life and legacy of Dr. King. We must all come together today and say, how do we keep the dream alive in the 21st century? The basic premise of my speech is, despite the many ills and injustices that are in the world today, we are, in fact, living the dream. And it is up to each and every one of us, it is up to this generation to keep the dream alive. And I'm not suggesting that all is well and that there's no more work to be done. However, we have come a long way from the March on Washington in 1963. This year, 2013, represents the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. And it is fitting that 3 days from now, my wife, Michelle, and my kids will be in Washington, D.C. at the inauguration on the national holiday for Martin Luther King to watch an African American be inaugurated for the President of the United States for the second time. 45 years ago, the Civil Rights Act was passed. Think about that. 45 years ago, the Civil Rights Act was passed, and we are about to celebrate the inauguration of an African American president for the second time. 45 years ago, and we've come a long ways from 45 years ago. You know, if we were to rewind and go back 45 years, the Dow Jones reached a record high of 985. Michelle, a Toyota costs $1,666. A little bit more now, huh? 45 years ago, Diane Carroll starred in the hit show Julia, and Sidney Poitier was at the top of the box office in terms of actors. 45 years ago, Duke Ellington was giving a new meaning to jazz, and Ray Charles had Georgia on his mind while Otis Redding was sitting by the dock of the bay watching the tides roll away. 45 years ago, black studies departments were popping up. There were riots in over 100 cities. Militancy and poets arise all over the place. People trying to have a voice and to find their place in the United States of America, where we were evolving as a nation. Here we are 45 years later, and I contend in so many ways we are living the dream, and it is up to us, this current generation, to keep the dream alive. Today, I would like to pose 4 simple questions. How has the dream been realized? Number 2, since Dr. King is not here today, then who has picked up the torch for the current generation? Number 3, what will be the legacy 45 years from now? And number 4, what can each of us do to keep the dream alive? The first question is, how has the dream been realized? The dream has been realized through self-development of several generations. Dr. King understood the importance of self-development. It was reflected in his life. Dr. King knew the importance of studying. He knew the power of knowledge. He knew that a mind was a terrible thing to waste. He knew that if he did his best, God would do the rest. Therefore, early in Dr. King's life, he decided to develop himself to the fullest. Consider this. At the age of 15, he finished high school. At the age of 19, he started working, at the age of 15, he finished high school and went on to college, and at the age of 19, he started working on his master's degree. At 22, he finished his master's degree and started working on his Ph.D. And at 25, he had earned his Ph.D. and started pastoring a church, the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. And at the age of 26, he started the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And from that point, he went on to build a better world. I contend that Dr. King knew a little something about self-development. Or as my daughter would say, a little something, something. We only need to look around this room and see how self-development has changed the lives of people. We need only survey the landscape of America to see how self-development has brought us how self-development has brought us from 45 years ago. We need only look at the acute analytical ability of Alex Haley, or the bad, bodacious brilliance of Bill Cosby, or the optimistic open-mindedness of Oprah Winfrey, or the calm, courageous character of Coretta Scott King, or the marvelous mystical magic of Maya Angelou, to see that we are living the dream each and every day. Would anyone care to dispute the fact that in the face of adversity, African Americans have stood up and moved forward in every walk of life? The road has been long, the struggle has been great, but we are living the dream because of the shoulders of those that we are standing on. During the Civil Rights Movement, my Uncle Bob, who was at Jet Magazine, would travel with Dr. King to cover a story. The publisher, John H. Johnson, would often tell Uncle Bob, you don't have to go down there. It's pretty dangerous. But Uncle Bob didn't care, and he would go and cover the story. He would go down to and cover the story in Mississippi and Montgomery and Birmingham and in Selma. Dr. King, he would travel with Dr. King so that Black America would know the story of the struggle of the movement. That was the legacy of Jet Magazine. It was Uncle Bob at Jet who went on with Dr. King at the height of the Montgomery bus boycott, and in August of 1955, traveled to Money, Mississippi to cover the brutal murder of Emmett Till. The story with the picture of Emmett Till appeared on the cover of Jet Magazine, and it pricked the soul and the heart and the conscience of this country, and it energized the civil rights movement. No, as a country, we are not where we need to be, but thank God we are not where we once were. We have come a mighty long way in this struggle. Everyone here is living and realizing the dream each and every day. We have realized that dream through self-development, in education, in business, in government, and in industry. But Dr. King did not only espouse self-development. As a Baptist minister, he was also spiritually aware. Some may ask, well, since Dr. King is not here today, who has picked up the torch for the current generation? I contend that if everyone here today commits themselves to self-development and being spiritually aware, then there will be plenty of people to pick up the torch and meet the needs of the present age. You see, every generation must meet the needs of the present age. We cannot recreate the past and boycott in Birmingham and sit in Selma or march in Montgomery. We have to stand up with a moral conscience and meet the needs of today. I contend that spiritual awareness transcends time, and that the same God that delivered Dr. King in the 20th century will be the same God to deliver us in the 21st century. As a Baptist minister, Dr. King understood that God was on his side. Dr. King realized the power of truth and love. Dr. King knew that God had moral laws that were higher than man's law. Dr. King knew that God would never, ever fail him. Therefore, Dr. King fought a good fight, knowing that if he fought for justice, peace, and love, that he would win the battle, even in the face of adversity. So he fought the system, always knowing that jail cells could not contain him, Biting dogs could not scare him. Fire hoses could not turn him. Blatant racism would never deter him. Hooded Klansmen would never frighten him, and deadly bombs could not distract him. Dr. King marched on knowing that there's a God who rules above with a hand of power and a heart of love. And if we're right, he'll fight our battles and give us the victory, and we will always win. We must have that same spiritual awareness to meet the needs of the present age. The present internet age talks about BG, before Google. I told my daughter once to go look something up, and she said, "Let me see your phone." I was like, oh, man, I mean, I know we have one of the top 10 video games in the country, but I guess I'm still out of touch. But BG in the current age really stands for before Google. But instead of talking about before Google, with our spiritual awareness, how about we talk about before God? Before God, we dedicate our lives to keeping the dream alive. Before God, we teach little black boys how to become strong black men. Before God, we become spiritually aware to help the homeless, to feed the hungry, to be a mother to the motherless, a father to the fatherless, to fight the tsunami of injustice and the tsunami of miseducation and poverty, the tsunami of religious bigotry and racism, and the tsunami of joblessness, and the tsunami of the digital divide. So the question is, in the current face of adversity, who has picked up the torch for a new generation of leadership? The 21st century has emerged, and a new generation of leadership has risen to meet the needs of the present age. All we have to do is look around. Look at the joyous jubilation of Jim McGovern. The driven dedicated drumbeat of Deval Patrick, the humble, honorable heroism of Hillary Clinton, the marching, meaningful mission of Michael Eric Dyson, the daunting, determined dignity of Donna Brazile, the serene, subtle strength of Spike Lee, or the bright, brave brilliance of Barack Obama. And we can clearly see a new generation has stepped forward, and if they stay focused and keep God on their side through self-development and spiritual awareness, then the dream will be kept alive. It is up to all of us to develop and stay spiritually aware if we want to move forward with the legacy of Dr. King. My Uncle Bob used to always say, "Nephew, fly with the eagles. Don't run with the turtles." And it's really interesting if you think about it. It took me a long time to figure out what Uncle Bob was talking about. I used to think he was like, run fast, turtles, they're just going along, but the eagles, they're soaring. But it's a really interesting kind of story about eagles. You see, the eagle can fly above a storm. When a storm is approaching and the eagle sees the storm coming, the eagle will take its long wingspan and use the updraft to fly above the storm. And it will lift him over the storm. And as the storm passes, he's flying over it. The eagles do not fly through the storm, but they fly above the storm. In our current state, it is only through the enlightenment of God's spiritual awareness that we must rise above the storms that are hitting our nation today. We must rise above the storm of petty politics. We must rise above the storm of home foreclosures and a do-nothing Congress. We must rise above the storm of gun violence in our schools and soldiers dying in war. But, not only must we be self-developed, we must be spiritually aware. We must be committed to social change. You see, with the legacy of Dr. King, 45 years from now, what will that legacy be? What will our dream be 45 years from now? As we think about Dr. King, he used all of his talents to bring about social change. He used his talents to make the world a better place. He used his knowledge to challenge an unjust system. He used his charisma to motivate a people. He used his voice to spread throughout the world. He used his vision to see a world that could be. He used his power to seek justice at home and peace abroad. He used his gift that God had given him to build a better world. Dr. King could have chosen a comfortable life. He was pastoring a very large church in Alabama. He could have taught at a college or university. Even he could have become a college president. He could have chosen to seek political office, but he did not choose a life of comfort or convenience. He chose a life of controversy and challenge. He chose to challenge the bus system in Montgomery. He chose to fight for the Voting Rights Act in Selma. He chose to integrate Birmingham, to march on Washington, to speak out against the Vietnam War, and he chose to march to help the garbage workers in Memphis. Therefore, if we want to build on Dr. King's legacy so that 45 years from now, things will be better and even different than they are today, then we must fight a good fight and come together and continue to fight this battle to create social change. In government, we must fight to pass legislation to give all Americans the opportunity for a decent job and a good education. We must pass legislation to stop the proliferation of guns in our schools. In corporate America, we must fight for companies to invest in young entrepreneurs to get their businesses started. In education, we must fight to make sure that we have teachers who will teach for life and not teach for a living, and train a great generation who will rise up and live and create and create the future of this country. If we commit ourselves to self-development and being spiritually aware, then we will be armed with the basic tenets to bring about social change that will make the world better 45 years from now. One of the goals of Jet Magazine and Uncle Bob was to keep people aware of what was going on in the world, to invoke a positive change within the community. Our challenge today is to continue that same type of legacy, to invoke positive change, to make sure everyone is socially conscious. My Uncle Bob, along with Dr. King and countless others, accomplished that goal by helping our nation to see that the world could become a better place. Think about this. This is our time. This is our time. And it doesn't matter what Uncle Bob did or what Dr. King did. We love them, we respect them, but they're dead. Each generation must meet the needs of the present age. We must remember the struggle continues. Our elders did their best. Justice is still not present. We must do the rest. If somebody's homeless, there's work to be done. Somebody's hopeless, the victory can be won. Racism is still rampant. We must fight while we can. Peace is still possible if we all lend a hand. Apartheid died. Can you hear that African drum? Our parents did their best. Now our time has come. So what can each of us do to make sure the dream stays alive? First, we must combine self-development, spiritual awareness, and social consciousness to bring about social change. Second, we must hold on to the same human spirit that has enabled us to succeed in spite of the odds. The same human spirit that enabled us to rise from the valley of slavery to corporate CEOs. The same spirit that allowed our nation to rise up against the tyranny of terrorism. You see, there are all kinds of spirits out there, all kinds of human spirits out there. You have the spirit of the Boston Tea Party. You have the spirit of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. You have the spirit of Henry Ford, who simply wanted to build a car that his employees could afford to buy. You have the spirit of Albert Einstein, who won a Nobel Prize in physics. You have the spirit of our soldiers who stormed the shores of Normandy so that Americans could maintain their freedom. There are all kinds of human spirit in the world, but I think we need to recapture the same human spirit of our ancestors, the same spirit that allowed a black man by the name of Cheops, who was the builder of the Great Pyramid, which stands 451 feet high. It covers over 13 acres of land. It took 2.5 million bricks to put it together. And today, with all of man's modern technology, they still can't figure out how he did it. We have to capture the same human spirit that allowed George Washington Carver to derive 285 products from a peanut and 118 products from a potato. On this King holiday, let us recapture the human spirit. The same spirit that allowed us to endure over 400 years of slavery and to go on and to elect the first African-American president of the United States. The same spirit that allowed us to endure our children and the challenges confronted to us with our children dying in Newtown, Connecticut. The same spirit that allowed us to overcome the Great Depression and the Great Recession. The same spirit that allowed us to come through Vietnam and 2 world wars, to survive hurricanes Katrina and Sandy. And all through all of those kinds of things, it's that kind of spirit that makes us just like an Energizer battery, and we just keep going and going and going and going. We must never give up. We must never give in. We must have that same spirit that allowed the dream to stay alive. That same spirit that allowed us to discover the printing press and the traffic light, the baby carriage. The same spirit that allowed us to discover syrup and the ironing board, sugar, and even Worcestershire sauce. And let us continue. I like that on my steaks, you know. Let us continue to build on the wondrous works of W.E.B. Du Bois, the positive, persuasive prose of Paul Laurence Dunbar, the talented, tenacious truths of Thurgood Marshall, the strong, serene sophistication of Sojourner Truth. Let us keep the dream alive by remembering that Martin Luther King was a great man. We should look to him and say, yes, I can. He had a dream, and so should you. Why don't you stand and show the world what we can do? Some people believe the dream is dead. We have to stand. Our young people need to be led. Things are not what they always seem. There's a young person out there who also has a dream. Let us stand and join as a team to remember this great man who one night had a dream. Some call him doctor, some live his dream. Remember the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. We all can dream, oh yes we can. Don't forget the full measure of this man. We have faith and believe in God's will. Just like Dr. King, our dreams will be fulfilled. So let us go forward and remember one thing, to never ever forget the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. If you ever forget what that legacy may be, just always remember your ABCs and take an A and accept this challenge. A B and believe in yourself. Take a C and call on your inner strength. Take a D and dedicate your life to the dream. Take an E and educate your mind. Take an F and fight this fight. Take a G and get on with it. Take an H and hold on to your dreams. Take an I and identify your talents. Take a J and journey until the job is done. Take a K and keep the dream alive. Take an L and let love light your way. Take an M and make up your mind. Take an N and never give up. Take an O and open the door. Take a P and put one foot in front of the other. Take a Q and quit quitting. Take an R and run this race. Take an S and stay the course. Take a T and trust in your inner voice. Take a U and utilize your time wisely. Take a V and value your victories. Take a W and walk in the light. Take an X and X-ray your lifestyle. Take a Y and yearn for the truth. And take a Z and zealously keep Dr. King's dream alive.